And as I stood up and I started pulling on the rope, I had tunnel vision develop, this big black circle around my peripheral vision. And then suddenly I was looking forward toward the mountain. I was just very confused, like, what's going on here? And it went, and then darkness. But in this darkness, I thought to myself as it went like that, I must be falling asleep again. But instead, I awoke. In the distance, this little tiny star appeared. And this little tiny star, white star, came rushing toward me across this vast distance, faster than the speed of light, because I could tell that this was much bigger than anything I'd ever seen before. And as it sped toward me, it expanded and filled my vision, illuminating the space I was in. And it communicated to me without language, directly, just an understanding. It said to me, "You're coming with me." And I thought to myself, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not going anywhere until I understand. And so I put up my willpower to stop this entity from coming to take me. And it wasn't an unfamiliar entity. I'd been interacting with this angel, this consciousness, this orb of the beingness of the divine since I was a kid. And it wasn't just all of the starlight that I could see, visible light. It was X-rays and ultraviolets and infrareds and many, many other colors of light, forms, electromagnetic wavelengths. And it was both of these at the same time. So it was a multiplicity and a one, many lights and one light. And this matter contains this light. And it is a web of light that runs through everything. I can see a septillion galaxies and stars and planets and all of it. Everything is woven with this light, and this light is love itself. I've craved my whole life, the physics and the chemistry and the geology and how the whole thing's put together. All of that was infilled inside of me, and still I couldn't comprehend the divine mind itself.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Christian. I'm the host of this channel, Transcendence. I'm also the co-host of Cosmic Convergence, another YouTube channel that we have. And today I have a very special guest with me. I have Peter Panagore joining me again. We spoke last on Cosmic Convergence, delving into the UFO phenomenon and consciousness. But today we're going to focus a little bit more on Peter's near-death experience. He's a two-time near-death experiencer and a UFO experiencer as well as author. And I'm going to put up your books on the screen. He also has them in the background there. But welcome, Peter. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Christian. Glad to be here.
So how did this all get started for you? And I apologize because I know you've told the story a million times, but for those that don't know, you can start with the first experience and we can go from there.
Sure. I was an exchange student from the University of Massachusetts to Montana State University for 1 year so I could go backpacking and skiing and get away from my family. My folks had some trouble around my sister who had vanished when I was a kid. She ran away, but from our point of view, she vanished for a very long time, which left an opened wound for my mom in particular and my dad, and that caused a lot of family turmoil. So the first chance I got to leave, I did. I went home for Christmas and decided this was not the place for me. So come spring break, I decided to do something else. I was a high adventure outdoor person since I was probably 11 when I joined Boy Scouts, camping and backpacking and skiing and ski patrol and all sorts of things. So I went to the outdoor club and I found a fellow who had a trip planned to British Columbia and Alberta, a 10-day snow caving backcountry ski trip and a 1-day ice climb. And all of this was kind of right up my alley. So we went together for a weekend trip, found out that we were compatible, and I joined his expedition, just the two of us. The 8 days that we spent snow caving were fabulous. We learned a lot about each other. We learned to trust each other in this deep wilderness. This is the Canadian Rocky Mountains. It is an hour, pardon me, a day and a half or so from the Arctic Circle, a drive. It's pretty far north, and there's a lot of wildlife and very few people. We had this wonderful adventure living in snow caves and cabins for this week. And we
It's
topped it
amazing.
off. Yeah, it was super
I'm
great.
jealous.
Yeah, it was 70-pound packs, and there was this one time I had to re-wax one of my skis, and I stepped off my ski and I fell over my head into the snow, and I had to get. It took me like an hour to get out of the snow, but it was all part of the adventure. So we did this one day ice climb, and I'd been a rock climber and been spent quite an amount of time in the high peaks this previous year, and a lot of time in the New England mountains growing up on rock. But I'd never ice climbed before. Tim was a certified lead climber. I had not all the gear I needed, none of it actually, and I had to borrow and rent. I came up short. I had an axe and a hammer. I had everything else I needed, but I didn't have two axes. And I talked to Tim into going ahead with this climb, even though it turned out to be a bad decision. We got to the climb that day, and it was right off the Icefields Parkway, north of Calgary, north of Banff. And it's a world famous climb called Lower Weeping Wall. And there were a bunch of other teams on the ice this day. We were the last to arrive, and we began our ascent. And because I had the wrong equipment, I had one axe and a hammer, and the difference between them, here's a chopstick. Two chopsticks. So an axe is about the length of the two chopsticks, and so you get this big swing with it. But a hammer is really the length of this pencil with Jesus on the top. And so when you swing that thing, I didn't have the distance of the swing, and also I had to grip it all the time. With an axe, you can actually let go and hang on a strap so that you can relax. So all this meant that my ascent was significantly slower than everybody else's on the climb that day, which meant that our planned climb did not go as we had planned. By the time we reached the top of the climb, we already knew that we were in deep trouble. It was maybe a 500 or 600-foot climb, 3 pitches up, 3 pitches down, meaning the length of the rope, 3 sets of the rope each time. 1, 2, 3. Before we even reached the top, we knew we were in deep trouble because the temperature was already going down as the sun started to set. And we didn't have any more food with us. Nobody did. We had drunk all our water, but fortunately there was ice on the mountain to keep ourselves hydrated. But we didn't have any extra clothes. And we didn't bring up a sleeping bag or a tent or any of that kind of stuff. That was not part of the plan or anybody else's. So by the time we reached the top of this climb, the sun set, the temperature dropped about 30 degrees in a minute. It's a wet sport, so you sweat, at least in the temperature that I was in. I was sweating, and my gear wasn't super high tech at this point. This was 1980. This was the year before, or a few years before, high tech gear became more popular. So I was dressed in wools mostly. I had a polypropylene top on. That was a brand new product. But I was dressed in wools and silicone sprayed jacket for waterproofing, no Gore-Tex. So the temperature dropped. Serious hypothermia began immediately with violent shivers where all of the muscles in my body began to contract and expand independent of each other. So I was a massively shaking, jittering, tongue shaking, jaw clattering mess. And we were... unlike if you go on a hike, you can turn around if the weather turns, you hike back down the way you came up. You can't do that in climbing. You have to follow a route up and use the descents. It's just the way the sport works. And we had to find a way down because we knew we were going to die if we didn't. So with the onset of this hypothermia, with the violent shivers, we discussed staying where we were, but we realized that if we did, we were going to die and die soon because we had no extra heat. We were wet. And once the temperature went down, we both got very cold very fast. So snuggling up together with each other to keep warm was not an option. So we decided to descend in the dark, traverses, repel, traverse, repel. And then I could tell you the whole drama of the night. It's high adventure, terrifying danger where every step we could slip and fall 500 feet, or plus we were losing our coordination because the cold gets deeper and deeper into the muscular structure, making motion difficult, aim difficult, and movement difficult. So it's this whole combination of aim and movement that becomes more and more stressed. It gets into your brain, makes you make made us make poor decisions. I could feel my eyeballs freezing in the back of my head. I had frostbite, eventually all over my digits, bubbles, not third degree, second. And we drove ourselves very hard through the night with willpower. We kept our terror in check. We held our terror off to the side, because if you lose your mind when you're in a dangerous situation in the wilderness, you will die. And that was a very strong motivator to maintain our calm and our cool through this whole thing. Even just before we got to this last rappel, I had this animalistic thing happen to me where this willpower that I was using to drive myself forward, with great caution, because every step that I took required physical energy, of which I had a limited amount because I didn't have any food, and I was a skinny mini at the time, muscular but no fat. And so that was what was keeping me warm, was my forward motion. But the more we walked, the less energy I had, the shorter the time we had to get down, as the temperature continued to drop all night. And so we were driving ourselves forward with our willpower. Tim was on lead and we were roped together. And then I had this thing happen to me unexpectedly where my brain sort of shifted from willpower to this much deeper part of my humanity, going back, hundreds of thousands of years, into my animal self, where my instinct rose up and took control. And the instinct that rose up and took control was survival. And so my quest to keep my fear under control had a new container. So it became easier to fight against my fear, and became I had to use less thought, active language thinking, to pay attention to what I was doing. My mind shifted from this hyper concentration on every motion to this more instinctual concentration on every motion. And I know it's hard to distinguish as I talk about it, because I've never experienced it again. It
Right.
gave me this depth of will that I've never reached the bottom of, but I've never entered into that type of my own animal nature ever since. So we reached the bottom of this second rappel, and it's late now. It's way past midnight. The temperature has dropped significantly. I don't know what time it is. I don't know how cold it is. I just know that we're clipped into the mountain on safety. So this is a position where there are iron pins epoxied in with rings and carabiners and straps and carabiners to my harness. So we're standing on a ledge. We're at the top of the practice rappel. You climb up this face, it's sheer, and then you rappel down. And so we're locked in there. So we're not going to fall for the first time through the night. I have the rope. I take the rope, I tie it to my harness, I take the other end, I toss it out around this corner. We had descended down this crag, and there was this corner we had to bend around, kind of go around this corner on this ledge. And when I pulled the rope, it jammed somewhere up above me. It must have lain between two rocks, and as I pulled on the very first yank, it tightened, and as I pulled it harder, it tightened more, and I never got any slack. And now the rope is stuck, and I can't ascend up this. No rope, no safety, in the dark, because it was shadowed, and it was off of the ice. It was on rock, so I didn't have climbing shoes on, and my feet were frozen, and we couldn't descend. And now we're stuck in this position, and we're alone. We're utterly alone. There's a lot more detail in the book about what happened through the night, and I should say it's being made into a film. So,
Oh, that's awesome. I actually didn't know that. Definitely going to watch that. That's amazing.
Thanks. It's a couple more. It's a couple years out anyway, at this point, but it's going well. Um, so we're in this position where we're locked into the mountain. We're not going to fall, but our hypothermia is advancing. I reached this place where I unzipped my coat, which is what happens to hypothermic people. They strip off their clothes sometimes, and I opened up my coat, which because my chest was hot. I felt like I was getting hot, sweating. I felt like all the blood had rushed to my core and I needed to cool down. But of course, that wasn't what was going on, but that's what was going on in my mind. And so by unzipping my coat, I accelerated the cold coming into me. I removed some of my insulation and made the whole thing go faster. I had this moment where I realized after I opened up my coat that I was not going to get out of this, that no matter how hard I drove, no matter how hard I pulled on the rope, no matter how hard I worked, I was going to die where I stood because that was just circumstance. And when that happened, I had this understanding of my situation. This peace descended on me. I stopped what I was doing. I stopped pulling on the rope and for the moment, and I looked over and I could hear the Saskatchewan River, which is bubbling down below us. We're right on the Icefields Parkway, couple maybe 100 yards in, and I could see this beautiful ice and snow covered mountain and a bazillion stars of all these colors in the sky, and it was extraordinarily beautiful place. The moon had risen so we could see more clearly, and I just let go. And this peace descended on me, and I started thinking about God. I had been raised Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox, two churches that hated each other when I was a kid. And I had had mystical experiences when I was a child. So my religiosity was strong, but my mysticism was the strongest component of my religion. So I had had experience as a child numerous times, a much more direct connection to the divine. So as this peace fell on me, it's a peace that I recognized and understood, and I gave up trying to save my life. I started thinking about my parents, the loss of my sister. I felt terrible that this was going to be in the news, and my parents were not going to be able to escape this outside of their house. It's going to be everywhere they went, and inside of them it was going to be terrible. And so I then continued pulling on the rope for their sake, and it, of course, didn't come free. I began to fall asleep like a curtain dropping, kaplam, in a darkened theater. I would fall and smack the rock and stand back up and pull the rope again a few times. I don't know how many. So I stood up this last time, and as I stood up and I started pulling on the rope, I had tunnel vision develop, this big black circle around my peripheral vision that began to collapse rapidly. And as it collapsed, I was confused. I was like, what is this? I have not seen this before. And as I swung my head, it's like looking through a periscope, and it just got smaller and smaller and smaller. And then suddenly I was looking forward toward the mountain. I was just very confused, like, what's going on here? And it went, and then darkness. But in this darkness, I thought to myself as it went like that, I must be falling asleep again. But instead, I awoke. So this darkness comes, I don't fall asleep, I'm suddenly awake, and all of my pain is gone. My cold is like fire. If you've ever put your hand in an ice bucket and left it in there for a very long time, it begins to feel like burn. My feet had moved from fire to cold to numb, but everything, I was still on fire, and all of my pain just went away. No more pain, and I was confused because I didn't understand where the mountain had gone and why I felt like I was dislodged from my body. And in front of me, where the mountain had been, so it felt to me, the mountain became this vast darkness, this velvet darkness that extended the width and the breadth of the universe, but there was nothing in it. And then way, way far in the distance, this little tiny star appeared. And this little tiny star, white star, came rushing toward me across this vast distance, faster than the speed of light, because I could tell that this was much bigger than anything I'd ever seen before. And as it sped toward me, it expanded and filled my vision illuminating the space I was in, and it communicated to me without language, directly, just an understanding. It said to me, "You're coming with me." And I thought to myself, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not going anywhere until I understand. So I put up my willpower to stop this entity from coming to take me. And it wasn't an unfamiliar entity. I'd been interacting with this angel, this consciousness, this orb of the beingness of the divine, since I was a kid, and it always had power over me. But I didn't understand my circumstance, and I had some capacity left where I felt like I had willpower. So I put up my willpower like a shield. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not going anywhere till you tell me what's going on. But it just swept me away. Like like a big green hand comes down and swoops me up. It just enveloped me and swooped me into itself, and I left my body. And as I left my body, the people talk about the silver cord that connects the soul to the body. When I
Yeah.
was a child, that was part of my experience. I would travel up and down this connection to my body with this angelic being, but this time it was severed, like snip, disconnected, and off I went. And I was inside of this orb, unable to move. I had no agency. I wasn't in control. I was like a Raggedy Ann doll, just kind of flopped on the bed, not able to do anything. But I could see my body. And my body was a humanoid shape, but not made of molecules or cells. It was made of light. And this is everything I'm saying now is metaphor. There's no language on the other side. I didn't have a
Right.
brain, so I had no capacity for language. And my reflections on my experience all come from the practice of trying to figure out how to say this aloud. So
Would
I,
you say that? Would you say that it's like more of a knowing,
oh, it's a
like
knowing.
when, like whenever something's communicated, you just know what is being communicated, and there's no words to express that knowing. You just know what the
Yes.
being means. I've had experiences, so I was just wondering.
Well, that's the way it communicates to
Right.
everybody. Whenever it comes to us in its power, and it can come to us as like you hear a language being spoken, but when it comes to us in its power, its communication is direct, and it's all like a data download,
Right.
kablunk, all at once, wide bandwidth, one file, but it doesn't take an hour. It takes a half a second, and you get so many gigabytes or terabytes of knowledge. And so this knowledge, I have this. I know who I am now. I have this sense of my soul self, my light being self, and I'm being carried up the route that it had come down in this darkness. And it's translucent and transparent. I can see it has structure and layers to it, but it's also transparent. I can see the darkness outside. And and it's speaking to me this whole time. This knowing. I know comfort. It's speaking comfort to me. So I'm not concerned. I have no fear. I'm completely content. It's feeding me contentment. It's feeding me power. It shows me its unlimited power. It shows me its unlimited intellect. Its power of thought exceeded my capacity for understanding, and it was superpositioned. And this has happened to me every time that I've encountered this being. It is both a reduction of the divine infinite and the thing itself. And so I had this. The way I'll describe it is like a dumbbell, and on one
Mhm.
end I'm in one end of the dumbbell, and then there's this connecting part, and the other end of it is infinity, and it's the same dumbbell, but there's somehow this connectivity of information flowing into this more limited form, which seemed to have been constructed for me. And so it's carrying me. I know that it's in two places at once. I know that all of this knowledge that's pouring into me is being spoken by the infinite, which is beyond my capacity for experiencing. But I know that it's there. And I'm superpositioned. So I've got all the way through my experience, there was this paradox thing. That's a theme, paradox. And so I can see myself from the outside inside this angelic being, this orb of consciousness, this energy ball. I can see myself in it. I'm like a little eye of God in this velvety darkness, traveling parallel and looking at myself inside this angelic being. I can see I can see myself from God's eye. So in some way, I am that eye. And when I look with my light being self, I can't see me looking. But inside of my light being self, I have 2 points of view. So I'm seeing inside myself from the outside and the inside. But when this part of me looks over there, I can't really see it. I can't see it. So there's this higher level of me. And I get swept up to sort of the edge of this velvety darkness where the angelic being unfolds, maybe, or pops me out into a much larger darkness, the size of our universe. And I know I described this other velvet darkness as the size of our universe. So this is bigger. This is bigger, 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 bigger. And it has a like a shield in the surrounding of it. There's a deeper darkness that I can't see into. There's this infinity that is beyond my capacity, but my physical form has changed, and now I became an orb of consciousness, and I expanded 10,000 times my human size, and so I'm a much bigger orb of consciousness, and my thinking, I have no brain. My thinking is my beingness, my selfhood is my thought. My selfhood is are my senses, and I have senses. I can see, but I have no eyes, and I can feel, but I have no hands. I am one orb of consciousness in this vast darkness. And as I understand myself, I think I am always this. This is my true me. This is my real self. How did I forget this? How did I think that that human was ever me? And I am content. I am alone in this space, but I have no fear. I am content. It's a place of timelessness. It's a place of illuminated darkness. So it's dark, but I can see in every direction and I can see. So it also has this paradoxical illumination to it too. And it's alive. It is the belly of God. I'm inside the divine being itself. Heaven isn't separate from the divine being. It's a portion of it. And I'm inside of this heaven that I'm in. And as I am there, the deeper darkness tears open and this opening happens, and this light emits from this deep darkness. And this light is the most beautiful, seductive, luscious, desirous that I'd ever seen. And as I see it, and it's huge in comparison to me, I want it. And as I want it, my thought is my action. And as I think, I want this, I move toward it and it moves toward me. And I get up really close to it. And it has these three aspects to it, physical aspects to it. It's solid, so I can see its surface, but it's also simultaneously translucent. I can see its depth. And it's like looking into a river. And then I can see through it into the darkness itself. I can see the darkness, the greater darkness itself, like a tunnel leading into this deeper darkness. And it also has these two things going on. It is pure white light, and that's a metaphor, but it's also every single color of every single star I saw that night. I'm not sure how many people have been in a place where it's completely blacked out, where there's no light pollution and there's no moon. The stars are phenomenal, and
Right.
all of that, and they were all twinkling, and it wasn't just all of the starlight that I could see, visible light. It was X-rays and ultraviolets and infrareds and many, many other colors of light, forms, electromagnetic wavelengths. And it was both of these at the same time. So it was a multiplicity and a one, many lights and one light. And so it was these two things at the same time. And I wanted it. And I knew that it wanted me. So I touched it with my being. And as I touched it, it absorbed me into it. It surrounded me, and then it flowed into me. And so it was in two places at once. It was inside of me and outside of me. And it was connected through this opening in me. And then all these things happened at the same time. I I heard my soul self being called into being continually. It's as if I had a name always being spoken, or a breath always being breathed, exhaled into being, and that my separateness from the divine was as creature, creator to creature. It called me into being. It calls me into being. And my soul, this part of me that incarnates is eons and eons and eons old. I'm constantly being called into being, but I've always been called into being. And so I have this knowledge of my own eternal nature and my human nature at the same time. And so I have this experience where I'm somehow back to like a human shape. I'm this being of light again. So I've gone from this big, huge expansion, and I'm sort of back down to this human shape, but I'm made of light, and I am radiating light. But the light inside of me, there's this eye. I can see this eye, the eye of God. I can see this eye of God, and it's looking at me, and it's illuminating me. My luminosity is a result of being seen and known and understood from the moment of my birth, never separate from this light. This light had lived my life with me as me, and it was loving me. And as my life review involved all of the aspects of the totality of my life, everything that I did. And then I saw this, I still had some separateness here. I saw this dark cloud inside of me. So call it the size of a peanut. I had this dark cloud, but it was extraordinarily dark. And and I became ashamed. And I tried to hide this darkness from this illumination, which was power and might and compassion. But the compassion of it was so much that there was nothing I could hide. I was completely naked in front of this light. And as it was in this state, it was saying to me, I love you as you are. I have always known you as you are. See, it showed me my life. See, I am with you for the whole of your life. And even so, in this light, I tried to hide this darkness. For some reason, it was like in my shoulder, like I had this shape, and I tried to hide it from the light of the eye. And as soon as I saw it and recognized my shame in comparison to this infinite light, my shame of this shadow, all the bad things I did as a kid. And I wasn't a terrible kid. I was just a kid, but I also was ADD, and I should have gotten in more trouble. I deserved more punishment than I got. And that's for sure. And so I tried to hide this. And as soon as I tried to hide it, I was enfolded into it. And when I became enfolded into this darkness of this peanut-sized darkness became much bigger. And I experienced all of the pain that I gave away in my life from the interior of everybody I gave it to in a chronological sequence since I was super young. And I became that person and felt each of those moments as I was also my human Peter self, experiencing each of those very same moments from the interior of my body. My reasons, my jealousies, my angers, whatever it was, somebody hurt me and I wanted to be cruel to them back, whatever it was. And simultaneous, I was experiencing all the pain I gave away and the emotional and psychological responses of all of these people, my sisters, my brother, my parents, friends, all that stuff, cousins. And it went in this rapid sequence, and it was a lot. and all of the pain that I'd given away, I had this, I'm going to give them this amount of pain, but the pain that I experienced on their side was that big. It was like a baseball and a beach ball. And this beach ball size of pain turned out to be mine. It accrued to me because I was experiencing all of their pain. It became my burden. And this burden was shameful to me. I was ashamed of myself for causing this pain in the comparison, my self-comparison to the unlimited, infinite purity of the divine being itself. So I had this juxtaposition between my badness and the divine's goodness with a capital G. But meanwhile, the goodness is still saying to me, I love you. I've always loved you. I've been with you. I've loved you through everything that you've done. I can't not love you. My love is what it is. And I then saw all of humanity and had this experience of seeing this equality of all of our brokenness, where so as I experience it now, my frailty as a human being, my flaws as a human being are the same as yours. And so and my capacity for, I separate discernment from judgment. I'm discerning, but I don't condemn peoples for being people anymore. I wasn't being condemned for being a person. I was not condemned at all. It turns out that all the pain that I had done was all my choice. I had separated and isolated myself in every one of those instances, not only from that person, but from the divine itself, who only loves me and loves every human being with this radical equality. And so there was this limited nature of humanity and this infinite nature of the divine. And that's where I self-judged. I judged myself against perfection. And I was imperfect. But the voice, soundless, kept speaking inside of me and surrounding me. And I couldn't see the speaker. The whole thing was a voice. And it was saying, I love you, mercy, forgiveness, come to me. I've always loved you. Just come to me, just love. And as I began to tune my soul ear from myself, from my own selfishness, to hearing the voice of love, sort of through the lens of love that all the love people had given me and all the love I gave away enabled me to hear more clearly this love that was being spoken to me. And as I turned from myself, from my own shame, as I turned to the light, I was inflated and welcomed and forgiven, and all of my suffering went away. Healing, wholeness, purity, goodness, beauty, joy, knowledge, understanding, truth, awe, paradise, bliss, awesome, all these things that we separate and give them theological, this is truth and this is knowledge and this is love. They were all one unit, and I expanded inside of them. And as it expanded inside of me, more light kept pouring in. And I could still see the greater darkness that was beyond me. And I wanted to understand our whole universe. And in an instant, all of the knowledge that I've craved my whole life, the physics and the chemistry and the geology and how the whole thing's put together, all of that was infilled inside of me, and still I couldn't comprehend the divine mind itself. That was still beyond my capacity. And as this whole thing expanded inside of me, I felt like one more photon of this light infilling me, and I would have obliterated and folded back into the darkness itself. I felt like I expanded to this state of Some call it union, where there is no self left. I had this tiny, tiny smidgen. So I was in a communion of union. I was in this almost to this infinite state of being where I would have all sense of myself, of my soul self. I have no more sense of my human self. My human self doesn't even matter to me anymore. That is, I don't care. All I want is this light. And so I felt like I got to this level where this expansion, like a balloon, you just a little more air and the whole thing pops. And instead of popping, I experienced I'll describe myself as a photonic self. I became my original self, which was one of the field of photons of the divine being, this immense field that I could see, this field of photons without end, in front of me, to the left of me, to the right of me, below me, and above me. And I was somehow outside of it, still in this darkness. But it was like I had a fiber optic cable connecting me into the divine being. I was superpositioned, even though I was somehow separate from all these other photons. But all of these photons, this field of photons, were all entangled with each other. So they're all entangled with each other. They're all one entity, and yet they have all these singularities. Each one is singular, and they're all one. And so I'm seeing all of this, and as I experience this highest part of myself, I see my soul self again. But now my soul self, as it's emerging from the greater darkness, has this very long tail of its own darkness, where it was itself, but it wasn't. It was more integrated to the darkness. It was a kind of darkness. It wasn't an illumination to it, but I had a solidity to it. And then suddenly I could see it at one point, and there was a chronology to this. There were all these lives. It was living, this soul, my soul self was living 1,000 lives, 1,000,000. I don't know how many lives, many, 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 many lives. All of these lives, and they're all being lived simultaneously. They're all like little tiny worlds, like olives in a loaf of bread, or like kebab spears stuck in, and in each one of these spears were different lives. Each one of these olives were different lives, and they were in this sequence, but they were all at the same time. There wasn't like one in the past and one in the future. There was a chronology, but they
happening
were
all at once.
All at once, timelessness.
And kind of like the hand is you, but then all the fingers is Peter, John, Melissa, and then it keeps on going, and they're all you at the same time. And I've had my own evidence to show that the soul or spirit can show you that they can be in multiple places at the same time. I did so with dowsing rods and on FaceTime with someone, and they had theirs, and they were answering our questions simultaneously, and its distance isn't a thing. So that makes perfect sense.
I'm glad you said distance isn't a thing, because there's the energy transfer itself can go through lenses and microphones, because there's no distance.
Right.
So I got to go into two of these lives. I wanted to understand, and I entered into two of them. One, I was a human, and another, I was some other creature, a little lizardy thing. I assumed that I was on Earth, but I don't know. My eyes were shaped differently, and I was seeing different light. I know that I was in the shadows, hiding from larger creatures. That's for sure. Right. And I went into this human form where I was a man walking on a street with a bunch of guys speaking an ancient language that I could understand at the time, but I can't understand it now. And there was a spirituality to us. And there were palm trees and some houses and some people, and it was like a thoroughfare where people were traveling between cities, maybe. And then somebody asked me a question, and I began to answer, and then I was taken out of the body again. And so I was like a walk-in. I like stepped into this guy's life, but it was my life too, because my soul was living it at the same time.
Right.
So then this photon expanded view of myself contracted, and I was back into this heaven, the belly, the womb of God, with a remembrance of my just previous human life. Maybe I saw maybe that's what happened. I saw my last human life, Peter, and I maybe that's what happened. So near-death experience is this thing that keeps unfolding itself for me. The more I ponder it, the more I understand what happened. I came back with this much of it. It's
Mhm.
much bigger than I can possibly say. So I'm still trying to figure out parts of it. So I had this renewed relationship with my recent human self, and I could sense my parents' sorrow, potential sorrow. And I said, "Well, am I dead?" And the voice said, meaning is, am I like severed from that life? Is that life over? And the voice says, "Yes, you're dead." And I say, "Well, what about my parents?" And as I think this, I'm swept across this womb of God, this oceanic womb of God, to this edge where part of me, this small part of me, is sort of stuck outside. And so I have a perception of our universe. There's like this field of where matter, energy becomes matter, sort of thing. But the majority of me, and I'm huge again on the inside of heaven. I'm like massive now. And this little tiny part of me is sticking out into our universe. And I can see our universe. And I can see all these galaxies. And way back, my attention is swept back to the origin of our universe. But it's not just like the Big Bang, it is in the now. So it's always being created. I see the greater darkness out of which light is pouring, and this light is weaving itself in live time into the structure, the molecular structure of our universe. This light becomes matter, and this matter contains this light. And it is a web of light that runs through everything. I can see a septillion galaxies and stars and planets and all of it. Everything is woven with this light, and this light is love itself. And it's pouring out of this darkness. And as it's pouring out of this darkness, it shows me that it's creating other universes. It's like universe after universe after universe popping out of this darkness, going up and one after the other, after the other, after the other, and all of those contain this same light and love. And as I see the light, it's like a golden web through everything. As I look at it, it speaks to me, but not just to me inside of this womb of heaven I'm inside of, but the whole universe and all these other universes and the greater darkness itself and all the light pouring out of it and all the universe I'm in, the heaven I'm inside of, all of it is speaking love to me. The whole thing is this unconditional, eternal, infinite love that loves itself so much that it creates everything there is out of love, with love inside. And all of that love, all of this expansive love is like with a magnifying glass aimed at me. And I am the most beloved, most unique, most precious in all the universe. And as I'm experiencing this expansive love, my vision is changed to earth, and I see all humanity, every single person in live time. There's I can see the sun, I can see the shadow away from, it's night over here and daylight over here, and every individual human being has this light inside of them. They have this golden speck of light inside of them. And I understand that there's this paradoxical particularity where the uniqueness of my being the most special beloved is the absolute same and equal as it is for every single human being. Every single human being is as beloved as me. And this love is expansive beyond my ability to say. It's informed my life ever since. And I should say that nobody on earth can see this love. Nobody can see the light like I can see it. They're all blind. Everybody's got this like shadow over them and they can't see.
Veil over them.
Yeah, it's the veil. They have a veil like a fog surrounding the whole planet, or like a foam, like a spray foam, and it's the kind of inside the spray foam and they can't see. And they're all doing stuff. Everybody's, it's not just like, the good people have the light inside of them. Everybody has it. There's no exceptions. And the voice says to me, in this love, it says to me, nothing is lost. Everything is my beloved. I enfold all of my love back inside myself. I am all there is, and I love myself. And then I see my parents' faces rise up from the earth, but there's two sets of them: mom and dad A, mom and dad B. Mom and dad A I see the length of their coming life without me, and I see the depth of their suffering, having lost two kids, and it's disaster. It's shattering. Lives are ruined. And then I see my mom and my dad with me, and they're still filled with suffering. They still live a life full of sorrow. But the difference between the two is it's vast. And I see their deaths. I see the moment of their death, they become like me. They enter into this bliss. And I'm in timelessness. And the voice says to me, you can choose, come home. You're welcome to come home, but you can choose. Here's your choice. But know this, that the length of your human life is the snap of your fingers. And the same is true for them. If you just wait for a snap, they'll be through this. And they'll be here. You don't have to go back. There's nothing to fix. I am love itself. I love myself. Everything is enfolded back into me. There's no need to fix anything.
Right.
And I think, but I can make their lives less suffering. And so I say, if I go back, can I come back here? And the voice said, yes, you'll come back here. I say, well, then I choose to live my life, trying to relieve some suffering from them, knowing that the length of my life is the wink of my eye. And the voice says to me, you won't live your life, and throws me out. And as I get thrown out, this angelic light re-encases me and compresses me, and I'm traveling inside of it. I look back through, because it's transparent. I look back and I can see the edge of the darkness, and out of the edge of this darkness, this huge beam of light, big, huge laser beam of white light is going right by me, and I follow it, and it's in the center of all of these doors, and there's like a million doors, like petals on a flower, and in the center of it is this white beam of light, and the light itself becomes dimmer and dimmer as it goes out to the edges. And this angelic being, which is also God, for lack of a term, source, whatever you want to call it, it's speaking to me, and it says, choose light, meaning choose the light itself, choose life. And I think to myself, and in the moment of my thinking, I make a choice. I make choices. I decide I want this, that, and the other thing. And I want the light, because the light is all there is for me. But I also want humanity. I want to be a broken human being, because I knew that I was coming back as a messenger, and I needed to be able to be real. And so I make these choices, and then I'm going through this door. I'm not in the center of the light. I'm on an edge of it, but I'm outside of it. So there's some luminosity over here. And I go down this tunnel, and in this tunnel, this hallway is loaded with doors. There's 10,000 doors in this. And all of these doors lead to all of these other hallways that are behind all these other doors. And I scoot down to the end of this hallway, seeing all these doors I go by. I later understand that they're the willful choices that I will make in my life. They're all the probabilities of the direction that my life will take, choice by choice, through all these other tunnels. But more like not like a single page blueprint, but more like the Sears Tower blueprint, where it's got 100 and however many floors. There's a lot. And I get to the end of it, and I pop out into a space where I don't understand where I am. I've become much smaller and denser, and there in front of me is a body on a cliff, hanging off the edge, strapped in, and another body crunched over it, shaking it. And I observe this for a minute. I'm dispassionate. I don't know who this is. I don't know what's going on, but all's well with me, because I'm still in the divine light. And then this angelic being pierces the chest of the man and opens it and stuffs me in, like crams me in there. And I was now inside of this tomb. It felt like I was being encased in concrete. And
Painful being put back in.
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. It was Well, in comparison to like no pain at all. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I used to have my knee used to hurt. Now it doesn't hurt anymore. And I remember how it felt. I didn't remember any pain. Pain was gone and I'm stuffed inside this thing, and I can still see out this hole where I came in, and there's the angelic being, and I can look back into heaven, to the darkness, I should say, and then it just closed. And I can see the tunnel, and it just closes. Twoosh. And now I'm stuck inside this thing, and I don't really understand what's going on. All I know is that I feel this brain come back online, and as the brain comes back online, I re-experience pain, and it's not just the pain of my physical body being hurt; it's the pain of being human, and being a human being hurts. And as my brain's coming back online, I'm beginning to hear, and I hear a voice, and the voice resolves into language because my brain's coming back online, and it's "Don't die, don't die, don't die," and I feel this thing I'm in getting shaken around. And I don't understand what's going on, and I open my eyes, and Tim's looking down on me really close, and he's crying and he's screaming and he's blubbering, and he's scared and he's shaking me, and he's like, "Don't die, don't die, don't die," and he sees my eyes open. He said, "I thought you were dead. I thought you were dead. If you're gonna die, I'm gonna die. I don't want to die." And he pulls me back up again, and I don't know who I am or who he is or what's going on. And he's talking to me, and I slowly figure out my brain like, "Oh yeah, I'm ice climbing, and this is Peter, and I'm inside of this thing, and I'm like, what is this thing, and where was I, and how did I get here, and had I gone, and where's the bliss?" And eventually Tim gets me to pull the rope, and I pull the rope, and the first try, the rope comes free, and we descend, and we self-treat for hypothermia, and I became an entirely different person. New values, new ethics, new direction, new thoughts, new self, new everything.
Would you say that after everything you learned after the first experience, with what you know now, would you say it's more relieving or more of a burden or both? Since
Uh,
being a human is hard and it's challenging.
well,
And I know that a lot of NDEers want to go back.
all I wanted to do was go back. I regretted my choice immediately. And then for the next
Yeah.
20 years, I prayed every day to die. Take me home today. I don't want to be here anymore. Even though it was my choice, I was angry that I was given the choice and made the choice. And it was as much a blessing as it was a curse. I couldn't tell anybody. This was 1980. I know that now, in hindsight, I know that Moody had published his book, Raymond Moody, but I didn't have access to it. And I had no idea that it existed. I was alien. I was different than every single person. Everything I saw emitted light. I mean, not like I imagined that it's emitting light. I can see light coming from every person that I meet. I can see light in the trees and the flowers, and everything has this radiance to it that I had been blind to before. And everything is made of paper. Everything is rice paper thin and easily torn, and its existence is projected by the light itself. It has no substance of its own, and that's plain to me. What mattered to people didn't matter to me anymore. All of my beliefs were gone. No more religion, no more belief in politics, no more belief in anything. Nothing that human beings created mattered to me anymore. And so I was adrift.
One of the things that I've come to understand, and channelers have said this, and even abductees were told by the beings, and this has come through in hypnotherapy, that we still don't understand, and you've mentioned this, which is very validating. We still don't understand that everything is alive. The desk, the pot that the plants are in, all of it. And that even though we can't understand that level of consciousness, it's that light that's giving life to everything. And I tell people, yeah, we're alive, but what's keeping us alive? Like, oh, you have a heart, you have blood vessels, you have a brain, but what's telling the heart to pump blood to give to your brain, or to do any of that? What's giving anything energy at all? Another thing that was mentioned was that a being who came through a woman who was channeling, he says, "Hello, my name is Aaron. I am light, and everything is made up of light. But you are light in substance. But when you pass, you will become light, such as I." And so that was very validating.
Oh, no, no, it's good to find validation. A lot of my work now is to show the universal nature of mystical experience between the East and the West and the similarities between them, because these kinds of things have been going on for centuries. It's just now there's so many near-death experiencers because of medical technology bringing back the dead. So it's fortunately coming into the public square. But the history of mysticism talks about this everywhere. Different language, different cultures, different religions, but it's everywhere. We're made of light. Jesus, there's this scene where he's going into Palm Sunday and he's going into town, Jerusalem, and they tell him to be quiet. And he says, even the rocks would cry out. That's because they're alive, because the divine light is inside of everything there is. There's nothing is except the divine, period. In our universe. And so I was fortunate to be able to have learned meditation when I was in high school. I went to a Catholic high school. I learned centering prayer back in the 70s when it was brand new because the monastery was near my high school. And I took to it way back then. It became my refuge. I discovered that when I went inside myself and practiced non-attachment to myself, that I was at peace with the world. The only solace I have in the world is this light itself, my beloved, who loves me first. I was fortunate to run into Kriya Yoga through Paramahansa Yogananda and the Yoga Sutras, and a mime teacher. I was also kind of not an official minor in theater, but I did a lot of theater, and I was studying mime, and my mime teacher taught yoga and showed me chi, prana, energy, which I came back with a whole dose of, which was real to me. And so I began my Kriya Yoga practice that I've continued to this day, trying to bring heaven here now. My pursuit, because I changed the course of my life. This changed the course of my life. I was going to go to graduate school in architecture to join the family firm. My sister was in graduate school at the time in architecture. My dad is an architect and was going to be one myself. Had been working in construction all the way through college to, learn how to hammer a nail and put a building together so that I'd be prepared for this. Pushing a pencil at my dad's at the drafting board much of my life, but I can't do that. I got to figure out what happened to me. So I went to divinity school at Yale and I studied mysticism. And what I discovered in the mystical tradition was that I wasn't alone, that there's this whole history of people like me, and that they lived in the world but weren't of the world. And so that's became how I functioned. I used my Kriya Yoga and my centering prayer practice to reconnect me to heaven inside me by stepping aside and stepping aside and stepping aside. My aim became the oneness of being. This experience of union, communion that I talked about, that is still the focus of my journey. People talk about wanting to manifest things, which is fine. They can do that if they wish, and they do. But as for me, all I want is heaven. All I want is the oneness of being, because I am totally temporary here. I am passing through, but I last, and I want to continue to go. I want to go back to my original self, the highest level I can be, because that's where I am beloved, most beloved. That's really all I want. So my life has become this long practice of an interior journey to bring heaven here now.
When you were mentioning, how could you forget who you are, and bringing that up, I haven't had an NDE, but I've had out of body experiences. And in one particular case, I was just walking from the supermarket, grocery store one day, and I had the most massive deja vu. It's like that veil we were talking about. It was like it came off and it stopped me in the middle of the street. I didn't even finish crossing, and I knew who I was. I was like, how could I forget? You could ask me any question in the world and I can give you the answer. It was like that kind of knowledge. I knew what happens when the physical body dies. I knew why. I knew that this was all temporary. I was right where I was supposed to be. And then it was kind of like taken from me. And the only thing I can describe is I felt dumber. Like it was weird. And I was just like, no, like when it left. And I've had a couple of experiences like that. So
Well,
that
all mystical
it makes,
experiences have a beginning and an end.
yeah, it's just fleeting.
Yep, and it leaves you longing. It leaves a person
Yeah.
longing,
I
which,
was frustrated for days.
of course,
Yeah.
and you can never recapture the one that you had, but it
Yeah.
always leaves a lingering, ineffable, noetic knowledge inside oneself that can be mined.
Right. And what you said with meditation, I've had circumstantial mediumship, weird things happening, and then until I started meditating, that's when I could more consciously do it. And that's in part why I asked, because whenever spirit is like communicating, it's not like we're talking on a podcast right now. For me, it's, and everyone who does mediumship, it's different. And I don't do it for money. I don't even do it very often. But whenever it happens, it's more like I just know what the being person means. And I kind of have to like translate it. And sometimes they'll say weird stuff and I have to bring it up to the person and it makes sense to them, even if it doesn't make sense to me. But it's just that knowing, I know what they mean, but they're not talking with their mouths or anything like that. In other podcasts, you had mentioned that your first near death experience, you were terrified, but then the second one, you were welcoming it. If you could go briefly into your second experience.
Sure. It was 2015, and I died of a widowmaker heart attack, which is 100% blockage and only 5 to 6% of survival rate. Yeah, and it's genetic. So my dad, they rescued him. He was one of those 5 or 6%. My sister died. The sister who I mentioned, she eventually died in 2007 of a heart attack, and my grandfather died on my birthday of the same thing back when I was 1. Runs in the family. So I was 56 years old, and I was, like, make a long story short, I was in a yoga class. And I knew, I live in a small town. I know everybody there. I live in a resort town, so there's a lot of summer people there too. I know quite a number of them. And I got late to class, so I set up in the door jam. Like, she opened the door. She's a friend of mine. She opened the door, and so my mat was like in the hallway and in the classroom. And she's leading the class, and it was a hot summer day, and I started sweating immediately. And I thought, oh my God, why am I so hot? And I thought, oh, geez, I don't feel great. So I thought, I'm just going to lay down on my back. Shavasana for you yogis. So I lay down on my back. I spread my hands out a little bit. My toes are pointed up. My legs are a little apart. And I think, boy, I am sweating and sweating and sweating. What is going on here? And I started feeling pain in my chest. And I'd been on the ski patrol, I don't know, 5 or 6 years in high school and college. And then I was an ambulance attendant for a number of years. I lived on this island off the coast of Maine for a while, and I worked in the ambulance. And I was like, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. And I was like, it can't be that bad. I ran 5K the day before, 3 miles the day before. And so I thought, I'm not going to be a distraction. I'm going to get up and I'm going to leave the room. So I get up and I leave the room and I go outside, which is the hallway, an anteroom, and then there's the door out to this grassy lawn. And I lay down in the shade on this grassy lawn and I think, oh, I'm really having a heart attack here. And then I think to myself, oh my God, this is my day. I've been waiting for this day. I had no idea when I woke up this morning that I was going to die. And so I had this experience of joy. And people are like, well, how come you don't come back with joy? Because the joy I had on the other side is a bazillion times greater than the joy I had here. And so I was always sort of moping about after my NDE in this take me home today kind of thing, while I was mining my way into heaven. So I was having this great experience. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die today. This is great. And then I thought, but my daughter just had this baby and she left her husband, and I should probably try to stay alive. So I tried to sit up and I couldn't sit up because it was too painful. And then it got really painful. And so I used my meditation to focus in on my pain and rise above my pain. And it's a very easy meditation technique. And I'd been practicing it for years with pain. So I was in control of my pain, and it wasn't terrible. But when I wasn't paying attention, it was like an elephant standing in tree pose on my heart. So the yoga teacher comes out And she's like, Peter, how are you? And I was like, well, I'm having a heart attack. And she said, what do you mean you're having a heart attack? You're like, Mr. Fit. And I've been a vegetarian for 20 years before this. And it's like, Mr. Healthy. And I said, no, really, I'm dying right now. And I should probably get to the urgent care center because I don't know how long I'd been outside, 20 minutes or so already. So she said, should I call an ambulance? I said, no, it's going to take them too long to get here. I knew because I was an ambulance attendant, I knew you have 1 hour. So from the moment of your heart attack starts, you have an hour before damage sets in. And it's called the golden hour. It's like, no, I don't have enough time for that. So I live in it's in a rural area. The people who run the ambulance, they're great, but it's going to take them 20 minutes to get to the freaking ambulance to get to me. And then there's a 10-minute drive. It's like, no, I'm going to run out of time. So I got one of my summer neighbors who happened to be in there that day to drive me to the hospital. I had to convince her too. I was like, no, really, I'm having a heart attack. I get to the hospital, which is about 2 miles away, and I call ahead and I'm with the doc on the phone. I say, and I know the doc, I'm like, hey, I'm having a heart attack. He's like, no, if you're really having a heart attack, why don't you drive up to the hospital? I'm like, no, I don't have time. And I was like, okay. So I get in there and all these nurses I'd been the minister in this town, the congregational minister. And so I knew half the nurses, and one or two of them actually had been in my youth group when they were kids. So I know, and one of them's the mother and the daughter, and I know everybody. And the looks on their faces, so they bring me in. They give me an immediate chest x-ray. They see that I have 100% blockage in my widowmaker. And then everybody's demeanor changes. And everybody in the whole place, they're all scared. Because we're an hour and 20 minutes on a good day from the catheterization lab. And now it's been an hour. So my golden hour is over. And the ambulance shows up. They're going to transport me to Portland, Maine. And the doc says, I can give you this decoagulant. It might give you a 3% trickle through. And that might keep you alive. So he gives me this decoagulant, and then he offers me morphine. It's like, no, I don't want morphine. He says, why no morphine? I say, because I spend a lot of time in the back of ambulance. The diesel smell, it makes me nauseous. I'll be vomiting. It's not a good idea. I won't have any way to control my nausea because I'm sucking up all my time with my meditation. And he asked me how I was going to keep my pain away. I said, meditation. So they load me on the gurney, and my son is there, and he's in his late 20s, and he comes up to me and he leans in really close, like this close as I am to the mic, and he's holding my hand, and he says, Dad, I love you. And I look at him, and I just read all of these emotions in him, that he's not prepared, he doesn't know what's going on, he's scared. And then my wife is off to the side, and is loading me on the gurney. She grabs my other hand, and I look up at her, and I'm like, hey, how I said to you, and I wink at her, and I smile, how I said to you, the first chance I get to leave here, I'm out of here. I'm not going to take my own life, but I'm not staying if I don't have to. And so I wink at her, and she smiles at me, and I smile, and we load into the ambulance, and I'm meditating, and we make this trek down to Portland. And it's summertime, so it's, for those of you who don't know, Maine's nickname is the vacation land. So all these Bostonians and New Yorkers and Connecticut people, how the roads are all clogged, and we get the ambulance siren going. We're trying to make it to the catheterization lab, and I'm meditating. So I hear all this stuff going on because you can still hear when you're meditating. So I'm meditating, and I hear the paramedic call into the catheterization lab and say, we're losing him. And I opened my eyes, and I looked at her, and she's got the mic up, and she's got panic on her face. Not panic. She's got fear on her face because she was professional. She wasn't in a panic. She was afraid. And when she looked down at me, she saw my eyes open. She dropped in her professional self again. But I was dying in front of her. So I don't know what happened next in the ambulance because the pain rushed back at me very fast, and I dove back inside my mind in order to meditate to control my pain. Only when I went back inside myself, I wasn't in my body anymore. I closed my eyes to begin to meditate, and when I closed my eyes, I was out of my body. And I knew that I was still in the ambulance, but I couldn't see the ambulance. My human self was like this cavern. It was like this open cavern that I was just outside of, and there was the tunnel. And down from heaven, this angelic being comes to collect me. But this time, it's speaking in plural to me. Come to us. We've been waiting for you. So there's this multiplicity to it, but it's a singular orb of consciousness. and it comes down toward me. And as it comes to me, I'm like, I'm out of here. And so I just start to go with it. It didn't envelop me this time. I was like willingly going. And as I was going, I thought, well, wait a sec. I thought of my son's face, and I thought I should check this out. So I decide to go look around inside my body to see whether my mind, my head, to see if they're all okay, whether I think I can leave. So I see my son, and I read all his emotions, and I know that he's not ready for me to leave. He's scared for the rest of his life. I can see his fear for how am I going to live without my dad? And then I see my daughter and the baby. The baby's 1 year old, and she had left an abusive relationship that was pretty terrible, and that there were some potential dangers for her in her life with the child. And I saw my granddaughter had parallel lives. I saw her life with me, and I saw her life without me. And I saw that the life with me, I was the stabilizing male in her life. I was the older male person to replace her dad for a period of time, and that she needed me, and that her life without me was going to be much worse. So I turned around and I went back outside, and this angelic being had retreated back up as if to like give me space. And then it came rushing back down. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Come with us. Come with us. And I said telepathically, without language, well, if it's all the same to you, I'm sticking around because my length of my life is the snap of a finger, and they need me. So I turned around and I went back inside. I came to as they're unloading me on the gurney, as they're unloading the gurney into the catheterization lab. I went through the surgery, which is basically running a probe up my arm, and without morphine. I did the whole thing without painkiller. That didn't hurt. I'll cut out all the rest of it and say that the next morning, once I was out of ICU, what they call SCU, at Main Med, I announced to everybody in my room, because I should also say, at this point in my career, I was on television and in Portland every day. So at this point, I knew all these people. All these people in the hospital knew me. Some of my friends from Portland showed up. My family was there in the hospital room. There were nurses who knew me and doctors, and so this crowd in my room, and I wake up to this crowd in my room, and I say, so I died yesterday, and the result of this is the book was being released a month from then. This is 2015. Amazon released it early while I was in the hospital. The TV station called me while I was in the hospital and said that after 15 years, a new corporate owner had purchased the station and my show was being canceled. And so I was like, all of my world is in turmoil. And I came back with this a new resolve. I no longer, I sort of I made a commitment to my granddaughter that I would stay alive as long as I could, and I would be here for her. And I lost all of the desire to go home again. I became content here in a way that I've never been before. I still know who I am and where I'm from and where I'm going, but this second trip made me able to not struggle so much. I finally integrated after. And my meditation life helped all of this, but this grace, it's the most powerful thing there is. And so after this, within a year and a half, the TV station, we slowly closed out. My show was ended in a year and a half, and I wasn't sure what to do with my life, and I couldn't go back in the church again because I never was a believer. I worked in the church. I served the people. I did a good job. I helped the poor and the hungry and the widows and the homeless and everybody else. Everybody that I could help, I did. But I wasn't a church person, and so I didn't want to go back inside there again. So I embarked on a new life, doing what we're doing here.
You mentioned letting go of that, like belief, uh,
Oh,
faith,
they weren't.
belief.
I didn't let go of them. They were erased from me. I don't have.
Really?
It's like the that hard drive was melted down and atomized.
Yeah, and you're not alone in that. A lot of near-death experiencers do end up having it erased, and they're like, "Oh, I know now for sure," and they end up losing their fear of death too, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
really comforting. But that's amazing. It's amazing what you've gone through, and it's humorous in a way, your second experience, because you're like, oh yeah, today's the day. Oh wow. You're like, yeah. And it's a much different perspective. And I think that going forward in the future, once it's more common knowledge and once we understand all this, about that process and what happens, it's going to be viewed a lot differently. I think it's going to affect all of our social, you go to a funeral, yes, there might be some sadness and things there, but I feel like it's going to be less sad or less depressing because you know that awareness, that consciousness is still alive, still being. I find that amazing, and you're helping people just by talking about it. So I thank you for that. Where can people find you
Peter
for this?
Panagore.love. Peter Panagore.love. I'm on YouTube under my name, TikTok, Instagram. I do counseling. I help people integrate from their mystical experiences. I've had many, many others that I didn't talk about here, and from near-death experience. So if you need a counselor, I'm your guy. Peter Panagore.love.
I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here to talk with me, and also the guys at Cosmic Convergence. We're very happy to speak with you, and they want to speak with you again. Thank you guys for watching. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And until then, we'll catch you guys on the other side. Don't miss out on Cosmic Convergence, our group channel where we delve into discussions with guests about UFOs, consciousness, near-death experiences, and beyond. We also have a Discord community for like-minded individuals to connect and share experiences and data. Links to our Discord and our Cosmic Convergence channel mentioned in this episode can be found in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.